It's Johnny Mac's Top 10 Funny Things of 2020. These could be movies, podcasts, TV shows, random stuff I saw, but it's my top 10. I'm going to go from best to 10th. We won't go from best to worst because that would be an infinite list, wouldn't it? But I can tell you what would be last. The worst thing of the year was, of course, Sarah Cooper's Netflix special, which is completely inexplicable. You know, Sarah, she pantomimes to Donald Trump videos on TikTok, the inauguration 1 month from today, Sarah Cooper. But I digress. Let's start at the top of the list. The best comedy thing of 2020 was Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso on Apple TV+. If you have not watched this, you need to watch it. Bill Lawrence from Scrubs developed it. Jason Sudeikis stars as Ted Lasso, an American football coach who gets hired by a Premier League soccer team. Hilarity ensues. I watched this show. It was one of those few, especially as we age, shows that I watched with my wife, and every episode would come away going, there's just something about this show. It is definitely funny. It's warm. It's not over the top like, oh, but like you just come away every episode just feeling good. Ted Lasso, number 1, best, funniest thing of 2020. Number 2, and I've been telling you in the last few weeks you need to watch this, Natalie Palamedis Nate. Yeah, I had that a little lower originally, but I have pulled it up on the list. I keep thinking about this special. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't want to describe it to you. I will ruin your enjoyment of it. You just have to trust that I put this thing number 2, Natalie Palamedis Nate. If you have seen it, you get it, and you know why I'm not spoiling it. Everybody else, go watch that. That's on Netflix. Third thing on the top 10 of 2020 funny list, Auntie Donna's Big Ol' House of Fun, also on Netflix. Ostensibly a sketch series. There's a through line. It's really funny. I binge watched the whole thing in one sitting, which I rarely do. I thought it was awesome. I recommended it to people. They also thought it was awesome. Auntie Donna's Big Ol' House of Fun. That's on Netflix. Those guys also have a podcast. If you get into the special, you should watch that. At number 4, Sam Jay's special 3 in the Morning, also on Netflix. My favorite special of the year until Nate's kind of blew it out of the water. Sam Jay's really good, but Nate is next level. Number 5, Hannah Gadsby's Douglas. I loved this one. I know we're all supposed to worship at the altar of her first special, Nanette. I think this one was better. I just thought it was really, really funny, and I loved it. Number 6, a podcast. It's Tim Dillon's podcast. I talked about this last weekend. I'm always hesitant to endorse it because Tim is doing that tightrope act where if he falls, he's going to fall and he's going to blow up in the bad way. Not the, oh, Tim Dillon's so popular. No, it's going to be the bad way because he's playing with fire every week, which is what makes the podcast so funny. It's kind of sort of making fun of conservative talk radio, which I've heard Tim talk about in the past that he kind of grew up on listening to things like Bob Grant, and in another life I produced things like Bob Grant. I will tell you those stories some other time. I used to actually try and get the comedy out of Bob Grant. I could do a whole thing on that. Bob Grant knew how to do an entertaining radio show for the people that wanted such an entertaining radio show. Tim Dillon doing the extreme version of that. The Tim Dillon podcast comes out on Sundays. That's number 6. Number 7, also a podcast that I was late to. I found out about this from the New York Times, but apparently nobody knows about. Whatever Happened to Pizza at McDonald's. It's kind of making fun of the generic investigative podcast, but it's always funny. Every episode is different. It goes down some wonderful rabbit holes. Whatever Happened to Pizza at McDonald's. You should listen to that. Number 8, Dave Chappelle's 846. Is it the funniest special? No, not at all. Was it the right special? Yeah. Right at the right time, too. Number 9, Andy Samberg's Palm Springs movie. It's just fun. It's Groundhog Day, but it's not Groundhog Day. It was just entertaining. Andy Samberg doing Andy Samberg things. You should watch that. That's on Hulu. And number 10, I had actually forgotten about this till Vulture reminded me. It came out this year. Mark Maron's End Times special, which actually came out before the pandemic, but captured the zeitgeist of, boy, everything is terrible. So that's my top 10. Ted Lasso, Natalie Palamedis Nate, Auntie Donna's Big Ol' House of Fun, Sam J. 3 in the Morning, Hannah Gadsby Douglas, the Tim Dillon podcast, Whatever Happened to Pizza at McDonald's podcast, Dave Chappelle's 846, Andy Samberg movie Palm Springs, and Mark Maron's End Times. From the Daily Mail, the scale of the BBC's left-wing comedy bias is laid bare for the first time in an audit of its entertainment output. Research, seen by the Mail on Sunday, shows that out of 364 comedy slots broadcast by the BBC over the past month, just 4 featured comedians with explicitly conservative or pro-Brexit views. By contrast, a total of 268 slots were filled by comedians with publicly pronounced left-leaning or quote-unquote woke views. Wow. The audit was conducted by the Campaign for Common Sense, the CCS. 268 out of 364 slots were given to 99 comedians with woke views. It has prompted the director of the CCS to write the BBC director to call him out to tackle bias in BBC comedy. The BBC says it wants to improve the diversity of output. The reality is our comedy shows are awash with woke jokes, and there is nothing funny about such flagrant bias. Our research reveals primetime comedy shows are dominated by comedians who proudly share the same outlook and views on politics, Brexit, and Britain, and simply don't reflect the wide range of opinions held by the viewers they seek to entertain. There are loads of talented comics out there holding small c conservative, anti-woke, and pro-Brexit views. The issue is they just aren't getting booked by the BBC. Comedian Leo Kears claims to have been snubbed by the BBC because he is one of the minorities forgotten by the corporation. A right-wing comedian, he adds, it has been long obvious to anyone watching panel shows, sketch shows, or sitcoms on British telly that there is a definite bias against conservatives. And let's face it, working-class people, this gigantic monolith that we all have to pay for or go to jail, oozes a liberal, Oxbridge-educated, metropolitan elite agenda at every pore. The report's authors highlight example of non-woke comedians. One is Tanya Edwards. I like this joke a lot. Her joke, I think having a referendum on Brexit was a mistake. I do. I think it's like asking your husband if he wants a threesome for his 40th. He was supposed to say no. Good joke. The BBC says, we don't analyze our comedy by comparing numbers. We judge it on being funny, how popular it is, and whether it reflects a range of different voices and views. The Guardian also had an article saying the BBC's methods of identifying comedy talent are not match fit, and it needs to be better at finding acts via apps such as TikTok. This according to the controller of BBC Comedy. People can blow up quite quickly on TikTok. For example, you guys could be missing out on the British Sarah Cooper. You know British Sarah Cooper. She, I guess, pantomimes to videos of the Queen or Prince Charles or somebody. People can blow up quite quickly on TikTok, and that's why our old traditional ways of finding people, they're just not a match fit for 2021 world. Guys, I'm telling you, you do not want to find TikTok comedians. You're going to wind up with the Sarah Cooper of the UK pantomiming to videos of Boris Johnson. And that's your comedy news for today. Follow the show on Spotify, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and I'll see you tomorrow.